Late 1942. The SS Tilawa steams from Bombay, India to Durban, South Africa on a routine voyage. But mid-Indian Ocean, she's intercepted by a Japanese submarine and sent to the bottom. Now, 83 years later, the wreck is seen once again. Magellan's team dived Tilawa earlier this year, 2025, and filmed her from stem to stern. I sat down with James Holt, Magellan's offshore operations manager, and Doug Scott, project manager on the Tilawa dives, to look back at the incredible sights and challenges faced by the team diving a wreck nearly 5 kilometers over 3 miles deep in the abyss. I know it's going to be difficult for the audience to orient themselves, but just talking about Tilawa in general terms, James, obviously, and Doug, you've both seen a lot of wrecks. What did you think about just generally the condition of the ship? Was there anything that surprised you positively? Were you surprised at the level of destruction? What were your first impressions on seeing her?
Even though I halfway expected it, I'm always very disappointed to find a wreck laying over on its side. It makes the photogrammetry way harder. Normally in the deeper water, we've been quite lucky really, but most wrecks in deep water, they'll land upright because there's enough time for its center of gravity to reassert itself, so to speak. So it's always a bit disappointing when you see them on their side.
Seeing the nameplate in that state of preservation, though, I was pretty impressed with, because they look like applied letters instead of being etched in. And they are, it looks like you got a brush out and polished it up. I know you didn't.
Yeah, it's got to be a dissimilar metal, isn't it? Do you think, Doug?
I don't know what it would be, but it is. It's just amazing how clear it is.
Yeah,
this is one of the clearest ones I've seen.
Ships' names, have to be permanently affixed. You can't just, in this era, you couldn't just paint them on.
Yeah,
they had to be a permanent marking, so to speak.
And I've seen a lot of steamships have them etched in, and then painted over the top of that. Applied lettering. I've seen copper, bronze.
They'll be center punched in or something, but there has to be a physical mark. And I was wondering whether, looking at the construction of the vessel, whether they were actually bolted on. And let's face it, they used to build ships sort of, quite well in those days. Whether it was actually even a bronze.
That would make sense, because the Mauritania and Lusitania had applied bronze lettering on their nameplates, and they had just 2 small rivet holes alone just to hold it in place. So it could be something similar.
You can see it's obviously something dissimilar. That's why it's kept itself clean. Bronze keeps itself cleaner. You don't get as much growth on bronze. So. But yeah, it was always nice to be able to see the name clearly.
Yeah, that was hauntingly beautiful. I did not expect that at all. I remember our first shot we had was similar to that, when you guys took the ROV over the bow, and it was so clear as day and still shiny. It's yeah, that was a little bit touching. It was beautiful. When you first get down onto a wreck, first dive, ROV's in the water. First made contact with the ship. You've actually found it, which sounds like a big part of the work. What's the next step? What are your initial observations? Your initial surveying work. What are you trying to get out of it?
Well, what we like to do is we'll have a general flyover, so the pilots can sort of orientate themselves. We've got an idea of how it's lying, whether it's broken in the middle and twisted. And then we will go back and we will go and sit on primary points to get an outline. So we'll go sit on the bow, bridge, stern, and we will put a whole load of fixes into the survey, so that we can, produce an outline of the site, so that we know what we're working with help with pilot orientation.
And you're also looking for any major items of debris that could be an ROV track.
Yeah.
Trap, so that if you're flying in along, say for closer in here, for example, that you don't have a mast and rigging laying out above you that you don't see. So they'll always do an overview from a further distance to really see what there is there and what potential hazards.
Yeah, because also what you might not have seen, Mike, is that, you know, we're not operating with blinkers on. You know, we've actually got wing cameras, we've got aft cameras as well, and then we've got an umbilical camera looking up. And so we've pretty much got a 360 view and also a skid camera looking down. And so we're in a complete bubble of cameras. So, you know, as well as like we tend to fixate on, you know, what we can see in front of us. But of course, the pilots, they'll be looking at all of their cameras to make sure that when they're lateraling to port like this, they're not actually lateraling underneath something or into something, as Doug says.
Because I think obviously having the ship on her side, then you've got a whole unique set of challenges, because we just passed the well deck where you had the king posts, which for loading cargo, twisted and bent over. You know, you've got this bulwark. I mean, it's about 3 feet tall, 3 and a bit feet tall, but it's not like bent out at an awkward angle. And like, obviously the last thing you want to be doing is bumping into any of this stuff. Or wrapping your umbilical as well. I mean, obviously you've got pretty skilled people operating these things, but like, I would imagine you would still inevitably have to get a tangle at some point. Does it happen very often, or is it not as big of an issue because of your planning and because of your 360 view?
It does happen, but it really is I think the biggest worry is when you're penetrating a wreck, you know, that once your umbilical, you know, when you're descending down into a hold or whatever, or through the decks, it's just having a good look first and seeing if there's any rips in the steelwork, because the umbilical will always find it and get trapped in that. And then, you know, when we're operating in SimOps, where we've got 2 subs in the water and sometimes a lift line as well, then that's when, if you think about it, you've got maybe 17 meters between all 3 lines when they're on the surface. So between, you know, your lift line, ROV1, ROV2, you know, you've got 17 meters where they actually come off the ship. And so then you're working 5.5 kilometers down, trying not to get those 3 lines twisted up. And that is really where the vessel placement I mentioned before comes into it, making sure that you've got the vessel in a good position. So where one ROV is and the other ROV is working, you know, that you've got this separation of the lines, and also being, you know, the pilot's skill in umbilical management, making sure that there isn't miles of umbilical slack laid out. That's the umbilical management is the absolute most crucial thing for us, that, you know, we're not towing a great big bite of umbilical across the seabed, or it's fallen onto the deck and it's got wrapped around something, that it's constantly being monitored, you know. So throughout, when we're actually operating like this, so when they got to the bottom, before they moved into the bow, they moved away and they do an umbilical check, make sure they can see. So they pull the sub back, they can see a catenary, they can see their floats, and they can see that it's a nice smooth thing. And so then they'll like make a note of that depth they're at there, they'll move in, constant management. And then while we're operating, you know, probably every hour, they will pull back off and do the same umbilical check again, make sure it's clear. And then, you know, I think normally when we do have an umbilical entanglement, when it, you know, where it's actually caught on the wreck, it's just been where maybe the winch has been operated, been knocked, because it's quite fast. It doesn't take a lot just to pay out an extra 4 or 5 meters, and then the weight of it will take it down. It'll get caught on a mooring bollards or something like that, and then you have to track it back and, you know, and untangle it.
Have you seen Ghost of the Abyss, the documentary about Titanic? It was James Cameron's team diving the wreck, and like they had like very, very thin fiber optic umbilical, and they were sending the two ROVs they had through like broken windows and things like that. So you can see the cable like going over the glass, and I would imagine that would cause your eye to twitch if you saw it, because it's like the last thing you want to do.
That's what we would call a flyaway, I guess, a flyaway ROV. And they're unique in that the umbilical management, this fiber, is actually contained within the vehicle itself. So as they fly this, they're flying it out from, in their case, Cameron, I believe, was from a man sub. As they fly it out, they lay this fiber down behind them with no intention of ever recovering it. So they just lay it out, and then they fly the ROV back into its garage on the mother system, and they cut it at the they cut the fiber and just leave it behind. They're generally battery powered, so they have a very short operating window, and they're deployed. I mean, we could put something like that on Romeo or Juliet if we needed to penetrate in through portholes or doors to get inside a ship.
It's really interesting having this in the background, because like you go past things. We just saw there was the top half of a shell door that was swung open, and they're like little features like that speak to what these ships were designed for, because I've seen that before on other liners that were designed for like operations out to the Far East and Australia, like P&O's, Oceanliners, obviously this being a British India ship. And it was just hot and humid, and they would have the door half open so that the bottom half would act like a combing so someone couldn't go overboard, but you could get like fresh air into the like the entrances and the stairways of the ship. And seeing that one half swung open strikes me as it was probably opened the day of the sinking, most likely not by the impact with the sea floor, because of the like the lugs, like the locks they would have had to put on the doors like that. It's interesting just seeing things left as they were when the ships go down. And probably I think the most interesting thing that you guys saw on your ROV screen was it was like 2 or 3 teapots, like perfectly preserved in the sediment, right?
It's amazing how ceramics survive sinkings. It's always, but you had the what was called the natives galley on the forward well deck. So I think that was why there was quite a lot around that bow section. But whether the third class passengers were actually given ceramics, but I'd imagine that a teapot would have been probably more likely on the route it was on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if there's going to be one thing that was probably, but yeah, that forward natives galley, as it was called, one would assume that they were left to the third class passengers were left to their own devices when it came to catering. They're provided with a cooking area, probably for fire prevention as much as anything, that there wasn't any cooking being done below decks. Ceramics, you'll often see numerous plates scattered around in the debris field.
The superstructure has essentially, it looks like the boat deck has come down onto the promenade deck below for the most part, and it's quite obviously they're very lightly built, these upper decks, but I think I was shocked by the amount of compression and twisting. You can see the deck just there is like the planking has been split up. Do you have any thought on what actually caused this kind of destruction? Because I understand she was torpedoed, but it strikes me that there's like a lot of damage here, and it looks like it was done during the sinking or the final plunge, because there's quite violent, like twisted shell plating and stuff going on here.
It hits the seabed with an incredible amount of force, and we've seen on quite a few wrecks where in the cargo holds, the deck above is actually compressed down, almost touching the deck below. So that what was a cargo hold of a few meters in height is now a space having a few centimeters in height between the two decks.
And that's on you know, a lot heavier constructed vessel than this. I think, you know, we remarked on it at the time. It's particularly, the top side seems particularly lightweight build, compared to some of the you know, the older Dutch built, German built ships of that same era, where they were so heavily constructed. But even on those ones, you'll see, you know, quite heavy deck compression.
It's just the forces. I know when Titanic hit, for example, she was doing something like her top speed on the surface, like 22 knots, 21, 22 knots. And, you know, obviously, like, her structure was already pretty badly compromised, but the amount of, you can see that the forecastle is down by a huge degree, and then the after end of the break is like collapsed down. It's just this, presumably, you know, I mean, she's displacing like that bow section, 20,000 tons of water that in a column presumably came down on top of it when it hit the ocean floor. And I guess when we talked about the wreck, and I'd presumed that she would be in pretty good shape, but there are times where you look, like from this angle here, I know because we've looked at this so many times, where we are. It's like the end of the superstructure, but you kind of can't tell what you're looking at.
It's very hard to, you know, light issues aside, camera issues aside, it's very hard, I think, to be able to join two photographs together. That's the way I see it, Doug. Like, you know, when you've got an edge like this here, you know, or it's also jumbled up. It's not like the Titanic, you know, was I'm going to say it was reasonably intact.
Yeah.
And there was plenty to go on to mesh stuff together. You know, you could clearly see the rivets, you could clearly see, but of course, being over on its side, then you've got more sediment build-up, obscuring a lot of those features as well.
Yeah, and you can see it. You can see it here a bit. You've got the front plate's quite clear, but the images, the stuff in the background,
A lot of shadows.
Clear enough, is shadowed, and there is something there. But the photogrammetry can't, from this image, for example, can't fill in the bits in the back. So unless you could actually cover every square centimeter of all those broken and torn areas, you'll never get a full image.
It's just, I guess, some testament to the amount of technical advance that has enabled this kind of like work to happen, because, you know, 30 years ago you would have needed like a very talented artist to sit here for like months and interpret what he was looking at and paint it, you know, something like that, you know. And now it's incredible that you can document, as you did with Titanic, you know, document it as it is forensically, really. That's what makes a VROV pilot compelling, is that it's not someone's interpretation of Titanic. It's like, it is Titanic. It's as good as you can get. Like, it's the closest thing you can get to actually getting an ROV yourself and sending it down. Sorry, that just sounded like an ad.
No, I'm going to say it does sound like that. It does beg the question why you would go down in a manned submersible, doesn't it? I think that where other sites that we visited, is if there's a midships break, that you'd end up with maybe like the one section of the vessel has landed correctly, but say if the forward section has broken off or it's been so severely damaged that it hasn't really, the center of gravity of the ship is then lost in the other section, if you see what I mean, because you haven't got the machinery, you know, you haven't got the engine room, you haven't got all of that real weight. And also it depends quite a lot on the cargo. So if you think that this the Tilawa was carrying mainly passengers, and very lightweight material. Okay, obviously it had its cargo of silver, but that was quite insignificant really in the overall, you know, when you've got vessels which are absolutely, all of the hulls are stuffed with machinery, pipes, you know, heavier cargoes, then, you know, but the actual the bow section of the Tilawa, you had a massive third-class accommodation, and then the cargo that we could see mainly seemed to be material, bales of cloth. There was no actual. I mean, I haven't seen like a proper manifest of what was on the Tilawa, but you know, there certainly wasn't anything really heavy there. The other thing, which is always very typical of vessels that operated in sort of the Far East and the Middle East, is the bars across the ports to stop people boarding through them when left open for ventilation.
Yeah, you see photos of like dozens of bumboats that would come out and try and sell wares, and people try and scramble aboard.
Yeah, and actually fit through that hole. I think I could probably get my head through it, and that'd be about it. But yeah, it is surprising. As we discussed it at the time, it does seem very lightly built, especially the upper works. You know, and I think it was one of those things that had been modified quite heavily for a trade as time went on. You know, the additions of like the third-class galleys. You know, it went from being more what I would, you know, expat kind of transport with cargo to then being more passenger, where they added on quite a lot of extra deck structure and also sunshades. I mean, I think there's been you can see like a development of this vessel. I don't know what Liam's come across, whether from the original drawings of it, how much has been added on. Were the galley areas, the deck galleys, added on at a later date, or was it built like that right from the start?
For now, Tilawa still guards her secrets, but Magellan's work scanning and documenting the wreck has provided us with an invaluable insight into her design and what happened the tragic night she was torpedoed and sunk. Join us again next time when we sit down with Doug and James once again to examine more of Tilawa's wreck, learning about her final moments, and finding out what incredible artifacts can still be found strewn around the wreck site. Thank you for watching the Magellan YouTube channel. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment and a like. Every little bit helps. If you want to support Magellan's work in deep sea exploration and get behind the scenes access, visit patreon.com/Magellan Ltd. We'd love to have you on board.